My daughter's call shattered the stormy night, her voice weak and broken. "Mom, I'm so cold. Help me help my baby." "Where are you?" I asked, my voice laced with desperation. "Daniel left me at a bus stop. It hurts so much." And in that instant, a blood-curdling scream tore through the line. "I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge. I want to know how far it has reached." The rain was pouring down in sheets, as if trying to drown our entire small town. I was sitting in my small kitchen. The weak yellow light illuminated a pile of freshly washed clothes. My hands slowly folded each item, trying to keep my mind busy. It was a habit of mine, the habit of a mother, used to worrying to keeping everything in the house in order. The drumming of the rain on the tin roof was a roar that seemed to drown out any other sound. But when the phone rang, I jumped. The screen lit up, showing the name I was always waiting for, always worrying about. Sarah. I answered immediately, my hands trembling as if I sensed something terrible was happening. "Sarah, honey," I called out, my voice cracking against the whistling wind on the other end of the line. The static was awful, like my daughter was right in the middle of the storm. Then a faint voice, almost a whisper, came through. "Mom, I'm so cold. Help me save my baby." I felt my heart stop. The voice of Sarah, my daughter whom I had cradled since she was a tiny thing, was now so weak I had to press my ear to the phone just to hear her. "Where are you? Sarah, tell me where you are." I practically screamed, but I only managed to catch a few scattered words. "Daniel left me at the bus stop. It hurts so much." And then a sharp, gut-wrenching scream shot through the line, tearing the night apart. After that total silence, the call dropped. I stood there frozen, the phone still clutched in my hand, as if letting it go would mean losing her forever. I tried calling back again and again, but I only heard the cold voice of the operator. "The number you have dialed is not available." My head was spinning. Where was Sarah? What had she said about Daniel? Which bus stop? And the baby? My grandson. What was happening? I stopped thinking and started acting. I grabbed the old raincoat hanging in a corner and took the keys to my husband's truck. He had passed away 3 years ago, leaving me his old pickup with its faded headlights and wipers that screeched with every move. I ran to the garage, not caring about my soaked shoes or the rain hitting my face. I had only one thought in my head. I had to find Sarah. The truck pushed through the white curtain of rain, its weak headlights struggling to pierce the dense water. I drove to the hospital where Sarah had her pregnancy checkups. She was almost due, and I remembered her telling me on her last call that she had an appointment today. But when I got there, the nurse at the front desk shook her head. "Miss Sarah Salgado was discharged early this morning. Her husband came for her." My heart sank again. Daniel had picked her up. Then why was she calling me for help in the middle of the storm? I couldn't believe it. I started the truck and headed to the house Sarah shared with her husband, about 10 miles from there. The little house was on the outskirts, where she had moved with Daniel after they got married. I pounded on the door, shouted her name, but the house was dark, without a single response, only the howling of the rain and wind. I got back in the truck, a knot in my stomach. The westbound highway, the only route from the hospital to their house, appeared in my mind as the last clue. I drove, stopping at every bus stop, getting out of the truck to scream her name into the rain. "Sarah, honey." My voice was lost, carried away by the wind. No one answered. The first bus stop, the second, not a soul, just rain and darkness. When I reached the third one, as the truck's headlights swept across the tin roof, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A cream-colored maternity coat, the same one I had bought for Sarah when she was 7 months pregnant. It was soaked, lying on the dirty ground next to the base of a pole. Nearby there was a shattered cell phone, its screen broken into 1,000 pieces, as if someone had thrown it violently against the ground. I got out of the truck, my legs shaking so much I almost fell. I picked up the coat, clutching it tightly, as cold rainwater ran through my fingers. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice choked. I walked into the bus shelter, into a dark corner, and then I saw her. Sarah, my daughter, was huddled in a corner, shivering from head to toe, holding a newborn baby, red and wrapped in a thin diaper. Her face was as pale as paper, her eyes closed, her lips purple, the baby in her arms. My grandson was tiny, fragile, not crying, not moving. "Sarah!" I screamed, running towards her. I knelt the icy water, soaking my pants to the bone, but I didn't care. I quickly pulled a towel from my bag, wrapped the baby, and took off my own jacket to cover Sarah. "Honey, Mom's here. I'm here." I kept repeating, my tears mixing with the rain. I got them both into the truck, placing the baby on my lap, trying to keep him warm. My hands trembled as I dialed 911. "Please come quick, my daughter. My grandson." I could barely form a sentence. I was just crying. The person on the other end asked where I was, and I just managed to scream. "The 3rd bus stop, westbound highway. Please hurry." I stayed in the truck holding Sarah, trying to warm her with my own body. She half opened her eyes, looked at me, and her voice was a thread about to break. "I don't want to die. Daniel abandoned me." Then she fainted, her head falling onto my shoulder. The ambulance arrived after 10 minutes that felt like an eternity. A young paramedic quickly checked on Sarah and the baby. Her voice was rushed but reassuring. "It's a good thing you got here in time. She gave birth alone. The baby has hypothermia, and she's exhausted." I just nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down my face. They loaded them both into the ambulance, and I followed in my truck, gripping the steering wheel to keep from shaking. In my head, Sarah's words echoed endlessly. "Daniel abandoned me." Rage washed over me, but I knew it wasn't the time to think about him. I just wanted my daughter and my grandson to be safe. At the hospital, they were taken to the recovery room. I sat in the hallway, my clothes soaked and my hands still trembling. I didn't dare close my eyes. I didn't dare think about what would have happened if I had arrived any later. Every time the door to the room opened, I flinched, hoping for good news. Finally, the next morning, a doctor came out to talk to me. His voice was serious but firm. "Your daughter is showing signs of physical and mental exhaustion. You were lucky to save them both." I nodded, thanking him, but my heart was still heavy. Sarah was out of danger, but what had happened to make her give birth alone in the middle of a storm in an abandoned bus stop? And Daniel, the son-in-law I once trusted, what had he done to my daughter? The days that followed that stormy night, I walked around like a ghost. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of Sarah huddled in the corner of the bus stop, holding her tiny baby, her lips purple. 3 days passed where I barely moved from the hospital, sitting outside the recovery room waiting for any news. Until the morning of the 3rd day, when Sarah woke up, I could finally breathe. She was lying in the hospital bed, her eyes tired, but they lit up when she saw me. "Mom," she called, her weak voice melting my heart. I took her hand. It was ice cold, as if the chill from that rainy night was still trapped in her body. "You're okay now, sweetie. I'm here," I whispered, holding back my tears. Sarah was very weak, but she recognized me. I asked her what happened that night, hoping she would tell me everything, but she just shook her head, her gaze lost, repeating the same phrase. "Daniel left me because I talked back to him." Hearing that broke my soul. Talked back, Sarah was so gentle. Since she was a child, she had never dared to contradict anyone. How could they blame her like that? I insisted. "What do you mean, talked back? What did you say to him that made him leave you in the middle of a storm?" But Sarah just lowered her head, pressing her lips together, and whispered, "I'm scared. I don't want you to worry." I squeezed her hand, trying to hide the fury growing inside me. Scared. What was she scared of? Of Daniel, or that I wasn't strong enough to protect her? Daniel, the son-in-law I once considered a good man, never showed up at the hospital. Not one visit, not one call. I called him, my voice trembling with rage. "Daniel, where are you?" "You know she almost died." But on the other end of the line there was only silence, and then a curt text message appeared on my screen. "You have no business meddling in my family's affairs." Reading it, I wanted to throw the phone. Family. He dared to call what he had done to Sarah, a family I sat in the hospital hallway, staring at the flickering fluorescent lights on the ceiling, and I promised myself I wouldn't let this go. I couldn't let Sarah continue living with a man like that. On the fourth day, the doctor discharged Sarah. She was still weak, but I didn't want her to stay in the hospital a minute longer. I took my daughter and my grandson to my house, the little house where I had lived for decades, the one that was once filled with Sarah's laughter as a child. I prepared a bottle for the baby, changed his diaper, and then sat next to Sarah, watching her hold her son with that same lost look in her eyes. "I'm going to take care of you both," I told her, trying to make my voice sound firm. "You don't have to worry about anything." Sarah just nodded, but I knew she didn't quite believe me. There was something in her eyes like a locked door I didn't know how to open. Not even a day had passed when, while I was making some broth for Sarah in the kitchen, I heard loud, sharp knocks on the door. I opened it, and there in front of me was Mrs. Helen Daniels' mother, with 3 neighbors behind her. She wore a dark floral dress, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, her face as hard as a stone. "Linda," she said in a voice so loud the whole neighborhood could hear. "We've been looking for Sarah for 3 days. The girl has postpartum depression. She ran away from home. And you have her hidden here without telling her family. I was frozen as if I had been slapped." Postpartum depression. Sarah had run away. Before I could say anything, one of the neighbors, Mrs. Rose, chimed in. "I've seen Daniel looking for his wife every night, poor thing. Don't you feel sorry for the boy?" I couldn't hold back anymore. "Sorry? Sorry for what?" I shouted, my voice trembling with rage. "Was it Daniel who left my daughter at a bus stop in the middle of a storm to give birth alone, and you dare to say that I don't love her?" The crowd fell silent, but their eyes were full of doubt. Then I heard footsteps behind them. Daniel appeared, getting out of his familiar silver truck, wearing a white shirt, carrying a can of formula, feigning concern. He looked at me with a calm but cold voice. "Mrs. Linda Sarah needs to come home. I don't want to make a scene, but if you continue like this, I'll have to call the police. You and her, you're both showing signs of mental instability." I felt the blood rush to my head. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my skin. And on top of everything, he dared to say I was unstable, to threaten me with the police. I was about to lunge at him to scream in his face. But then I heard Sarah's voice from inside, soft but firm. "Mom, I'm fine. Let me go. If they stay here making a scene, it will affect you too." I turned and saw my daughter at the door holding her baby, her eyes red, but trying to stay calm. My heart broke. Sarah, my shy girl, was now trying to protect me when she was the one who needed protection. I wanted to hold her back to scream that under no circumstances would I let her go back with that man. But the looks from the people outside, their whispers, and Sarah's silence left me powerless. I had no proof, nothing to prove what Daniel had done, only my word, and a mother's word in their eyes was not to be trusted. I stood there watching Sarah get into Daniel's truck with the baby in her arms. He opened the door for her with a caring gesture, but his gaze passed over me cold and defiant. Mrs. Helen walked behind, saying nothing more, but her mocking smile seemed to say that I had lost. When the truck disappeared, I stood at my front door feeling like my world was collapsing. I had let my daughter go back to that house where I knew she wasn't safe. Tears welled up, but I didn't let myself cry for long. I picked up the phone and called Mark, my younger brother, the only person I trusted to help me. "Mark," I said with a broken voice, "we have to find proof. I can't let this go as if nothing happened." The night they took Sarah back to her husband's house, I couldn't sleep a wink. My little house, which used to be filled with my daughter's laughter, now only had the ticking of the clock and the sound of my heart pounding in my chest. Early the next morning, I drove to my brother Mark's workshop. He worked in a small corner that smelled of oil and wires, a place where I always felt safe when I needed help. Mark was sitting in front of an old laptop, typing quickly, surrounded by scattered electronic parts. I pulled up a chair, sat across from him, and told him everything. The call in the rain, the soaked coat, the scene with Mrs. Helen and Daniel taking my daughter away. My voice trembled not from fear, but from rage. "Mark," I said, pulling Sarah's shattered phone from my bag, "I found this at the bus stop. See if you can recover anything. I need to know what happened to her." Mark took the phone, examined it from all sides, squinting as if he were deciphering a riddle. "Sis," he said in his deep voice, "with the phone this broken, recovering the data is going to be a problem, but I'll give it a try." And about Daniel. That guy is no fool. He knows how to make everyone believe he's the perfect husband. If you want to confront him, you need stronger evidence than just your word. What if we install something in his house? I froze. Install cameras. Microphones. The idea filled me with both hope and fear. Is that legal, Mark? I asked quietly. Mark shrugged. Legal or not, do you want to save Sarah? If he was capable of leaving her stranded in a storm, he's not going to stop there. I nodded, though I felt uneasy inside, but I knew Mark was right. Daniel was too cunning, always acting like the devoted husband in front of the neighbors. I had seen him bring Sarah flowers in full view of the whole neighborhood, smiling as if nothing was wrong. But behind closed doors, I didn't know what my daughter was enduring. I ran a hand over my face, trying to push away the helplessness. Okay, I said with more resolve. Let's do it, but very carefully. I don't want Sarah to get hurt. Mark nodded and pulled a miniature camera from his toolbox, no bigger than a coin, and a recording device as thin as a sheet of paper. Sis, I know Daniel usually takes Sarah to the supermarket to buy diapers on Saturday afternoons. He loves to pretend he's an attentive husband. That's our chance to get into his house. I nodded, my heart racing. I wasn't used to doing things behind people's backs, but for Sarah, I would do anything. On Saturday afternoon, I drove at a safe distance following Daniel's silver truck. He took Sarah to the supermarket on the outskirts about 10 minutes from their house. I parked in a discreet corner and watched Sarah get out of the car, carrying the baby, walking slowly, as if she had no soul. Daniel was by her side, carrying a bag, smiling and waving to an acquaintance in the parking lot. He acted so well that I almost believed he really cared about her, but I knew it was just a facade. When they went into the supermarket, I sent Mark a text. Now. Mark moved like lightning. He was wearing a dark jacket, a cap, and slipped into the house through the back door where Sarah used to leave a spare key under a flower pot. I waited in my car, my heart pounding a mile a minute, my eyes glued to the phone, terrified someone would discover him. 10 minutes later, Mark sent me a message. Done. The camera is in the artificial plant in the living room. The microphone is behind the curtain near the baby's crib. Sis, now we just have to wait. I let out a breath, but the anxiety didn't go away. I knew that what I was about to see was going to hurt, but I needed the truth. That night, I sat in my living room in front of Mark's laptop. He connected the camera, and the image of Sarah's house appeared. My breath caught in my throat as I saw her sitting on the couch holding my grandson, her face pale and her eyes empty. The baby was sleeping in her lap, so small his tiny hands clutching his mom's clothes. Then the door opened and Daniel walked in, his shirt wrinkled and his brow furrowed. He threw a bag on the floor and yelled, "I come home dead tired from work and this house looks like a pigsty. You're so useless." His voice was as sharp as a knife, every word a wound in my heart. Sarah said nothing. She just lowered her head, holding her son tighter. He walked over to her and pointed a finger in her face. "If I didn't bring money into this house, the two of you would have starved to death by now. Why can't you be even half the woman Bianca is, huh?" Mark and I were silent. Bianca. Who was that? I had never heard Sarah mention her, but Daniel's tone, the way he compared her to someone else, made my blood boil. I wanted to jump through the screen and get my daughter out of that house, but all I could do was clench my fists, my nails digging into my palms until it hurt. Mark turned to me, his voice grave. "Sis, this is proof, but we need more. He's not just emotionally abusing her, he's hiding something else. Have you ever heard of this Bianca?" I shook my head, feeling like an even bigger secret was about to be uncovered. That same night, the second video left me breathless. It was midnight. My grandson started crying, and Sarah went out onto the balcony with him in her arms, trying to calm him down. She sang to him softly, her voice trembling as if she were fighting not to break down. Then the balcony door opened, and Daniel came out in a t-shirt, his hair messy. He didn't shout, but his voice was icy cold. "If you dare to come out here again, don't expect me to come pick you up a second time." Sarah stopped singing and turned to look at him, but she said nothing. She hugged her son tighter, as if it were the only way to protect them both. He went back inside, slamming the door, leaving Sarah alone under the dim streetlight. I turned off the screen. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt fire inside me, But I knew I had to stay calm. If I acted on impulse, if I went to his house right then, I would only make things worse. A week after Mark and I installed the cameras in Sarah's house, I felt like I was living in a never-ending nightmare. More than 10 hours of footage, more than 30 short clips that Mark meticulously extracted, showed that the son-in-law I once trusted was not just a cold man, but a monster. He insulted Sarah, called her useless, compared her to a woman named Bianca, whom I still knew nothing about. But even though those videos made my blood boil, I knew they weren't enough. I needed proof from that stormy night, the night Daniel abandoned my daughter at the bus stop, leaving her to give birth alone in the middle of nowhere. That would be what he couldn't deny, what would stop him from continuing to act like the perfect husband. I decided to go back to the westbound highway to the place where I found Sarah. I brought a printed photo, one of Sarah wearing the cream-colored maternity coat I had bought for her. It wasn't a great picture, just a quick snapshot I took when she tried it on, but her smile in that picture hurt my soul. I drove, stopping at every bus stop, every roadside diner, every small gas station. I showed the photo to everyone I met. Vendors, security guards, even truck drivers on their break. "Have you seen this young woman?" I would ask, my voice hoarse with exhaustion. Most shook their heads. Some looked at me with pity, as if I were an old woman looking for something that didn't exist. At a small gas station near the third bus stop where I had found Sarah, I ran into an older man with gray hair cleaning the windshield of a light blue cargo truck. He wore an old jacket. His hands were rough, but his movements were slow and careful. I approached him. I showed him the photo, trying to stay calm. "Sir, have you by any chance seen this young woman?" "She was wearing a cream-colored coat. She was pregnant. She might have been around here a week ago." The man looked at the photo, frowned, and then shook his head. "No, I don't really remember her. A lot of people pass through here." I didn't give up and asked him, "Were you here last Tuesday night?" Around 10 o'clock, it was raining very hard. He stopped cleaning the glass, looked at me, and seemed to search his memory. That night, it was pouring down in sheets. You could barely see the road. I thought I saw someone standing by a post at the bus stop, up ahead in my headlights, but I figured it was a broken sign. I couldn't stop, my truck carries gas. It's too dangerous. My heart beat faster. "Do you have a dash cam?" I asked, my voice trembling, not daring to get my hopes up too high. The man hesitated, looked at me for a moment, and then nodded. "Yes, but I'm not sure if that video is still saved. Let me call my nephew to bring the laptop. If you remember the day and time correctly, I can check." I nodded repeatedly, thanking him over and over, feeling like my heart was going to burst with hope. I stood there next to his truck. The cold wind made me shiver, but I didn't care. Just one piece of evidence, just one recorded moment, and I could prove what Daniel had done. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a small cafe next to the gas station across from the truck driver and his nephew, a slim young man with an old laptop. The boy opened the dash cam video files, scrolling through each clip until I told him their stop around 10:36 on Tuesday night. He rewound in slow motion, and then on the screen I saw it. Daniel's silver truck parked right under the roof of the third bus stop. I recognized it instantly. I had seen it too many times, its headlights an unforgettable memory. Daniel got out wearing a black raincoat, opened the passenger door, and yelled something at the person inside. It was raining so hard you couldn't hear anything, but I saw him raise his hand, point, and then slam the door. The truck sped off, leaving behind a figure stumbling in the rain. It was Sarah in her soaked cream-colored coat, her hands on her belly, walking with difficulty before collapsing. I was speechless, tears streaming down my face without me realizing it. "That's her," I whispered, covering my mouth. The truck driver looked at me, his expression soft, as if he understood my pain. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. If I had known it was a person, I would have stopped." I shook my head, trying to hold back my sobs. "No, it's not your fault. Thank you, really, thank you so much." I asked for a copy of the video, and he nodded, telling his nephew to transfer it to a USB drive for me. When I held that small drive in my hand, it felt like I was holding a ray of light in the darkness. This was the proof, something Daniel couldn't deny. An accidental witness, a complete stranger, impossible to manipulate. That night, I took the USB to Mark. He reviewed the video, comparing it now on the screen. 10:36 p.m., just as I remembered. "Sis," Mark said firmly, "this is enough to take him to court. If we combine it with the recordings and videos from the house, we can prove not only that he psychologically abuses her, but that he abandoned her in a moment of emergency." I nodded, but my heart was still heavy. One afternoon, I was sitting in my small living room. The yellow light from the old lamp illuminated the laptop screen. I rewatched the video Mark had just sent me. Every frame was like a stab in the heart. Sarah, my daughter, sitting on the couch holding my grandson, her hands trembling as she fed him. Her pale face, her lost gaze as if her soul had been ripped out. Then I noticed a small detail that made my blood boil. Daniel's cell phone, which was on the table next to the couch, suddenly lit up. It was an incoming call. He looked at the screen, got up quickly, and went out to the patio with the phone. I turned up the volume, trying to hear every word. His voice came through sickeningly sweet. "Bianca, my love, last night you told me you were tired, right? Rest well today. Okay, my life?" I flinched, gripping the edge of the table. Bianca, that name again like a ghost that wouldn't go away. He kept talking in a tender voice, calling the person on the other end my life, without the slightest hesitation, even though Sarah was just a few feet away. I looked at my daughter in the video. She kept her head down as if she couldn't hear, or maybe she was already used to his cruelty. My heart ached. Daniel not only abused her psychologically, not only had he abandoned her in the rain, but he was also shamelessly talking to another woman right in front of his own wife. I turned off the screen. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt fire inside me, but I knew that if I wanted to save Sarah, I had to keep a cool head. The next morning, I decided to investigate Bianca. I didn't know who she was, but her name had become a key piece of the puzzle. I went to the neighborhood where Sarah lived, where the neighbors used to gather to gossip. I stopped by Mrs. Teresa's laundromat, a talkative middle-aged woman who knew a lot. I pretended to ask casually, "Teresa, have you heard of a girl named Bianca around here?" She stopped folding clothes, looked at me and smiled slyly. Bianca Rivers, the pretty one who lives at the beginning of 5th Street. She rents a luxury apartment, always well-dressed, but has a bad reputation. They say her boyfriend is an office worker, but she spends like she's rich. Who knows who's paying for that lifestyle?" I nodded, thanked her, but inside I felt a whirlwind. Office worker Daniel was just an administrative employee. How could he afford to support someone like that? I couldn't stay still that night. I took my truck and drove to 5th Street, where Teresa said Bianca lived. I parked in a dark corner near a small shop and waited. At 7 o'clock sharp, Daniel's silver truck appeared. I recognized it immediately. It had haunted me since that stormy night. He got out wearing a white shirt and well-combed hair, looking like an exemplary man. Then a young woman with long, shiny hair and a tight dress came out of the building. He hugged her in a gentle but intimate way and then kissed her on the forehead as if they were husband and wife. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking as I took out my cell phone to record. I tried to hold it steady, capturing every moment. He smiled, said something to her, and then they both went into the building holding hands. I drove home with my heart in pieces. I wasn't just angry with Daniel. I was hurting for Sarah. She had been living with a liar, a man who not only abused her, but betrayed her. I went to Sarah's house that same night when Daniel hadn't returned yet. She was sitting in the living room holding my grandson, her eyes tired. I pulled up a chair, sat next to her, opened my cell phone, and showed her the video. "Sarah, look," I said with a trembling voice. "This is Daniel, and this is the woman he talks about, Bianca." Sarah looked at the screen, her hands tightening around the baby, and then she broke down, sobs tearing through the silence. "Mom," she said between gasps, "I knew it. I saw strange messages on his phone once. I asked him, but he laughed and told me I was crazy. And that night, the night he left me at the bus stop, it was because I dared to confront him." I hugged Sarah, feeling her body tremble in my arms. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, as my own tears fell. She shook her head. "I was scared, Mom. He said if I told anyone, he'd make everyone think I was crazy. I didn't want you to get into trouble." I felt a deep bitterness. Sarah, my good girl, always trying to protect me, even when she was the one who was hurt. I stroked her hair, trying to stay calm. I'm not going to let him keep hurting you, I promise. But in my mind, a bigger question began to form. Daniel was just an administrative employee. Where did he get the money to rent a luxury apartment, buy expensive clothes, and maintain Bianca's lifestyle? I remembered the videos the way he always boasted about earning the money to support Sarah and the baby. Something wasn't right. I decided to investigate further, and the next morning I went to Daniel's company during his lunch break. I introduced myself as his mother-in-law, asking to speak with management about an important family matter. The receptionist, a young woman named Anna, took me to a waiting room. As I sat down, she whispered to me with a worried voice, "Ma'am, haven't you heard? Our bosses are investigating Daniel. There are reports of unjustified money transfers from inside the company, and everyone suspects it was him." Anna's words were like a flash of lightning in my head. Money. So Daniel wasn't just cheating on and abusing Sarah. He was also involved in something shady at his job. I thanked Anna, trying to appear calm, but inside, I felt a hurricane. A week later, I received an unexpected call. The phone rang at noon while I was sitting in the kitchen, a cup of cold coffee in my hand. The number was unknown, but the voice on the other end was clear, polite, but firm. "Mrs. Linda, I'm Robert Evans, Executive Vice President of the company where Daniel Salgado works. We've received a copy of the dash cam video and some recordings about the psychological abuse in his home. We need to see you immediately." I froze the cup, almost slipping from my hands. My heart was pounding, a mix of hope and fear. Someone believed me. Or was it another of Daniel's traps? I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Of course I'll be right there. What time works for you?" Mr. Evans replied, "Today at 2 p.m. at the headquarters. Bring any documents you have. We need to review everything thoroughly." I arrived at the offices, a modern glass building in the city center. Sitting in a small conference room, I felt out of place among the leather chairs and polished wooden table. Mr. Evans entered, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a sharp gaze. He was accompanied by a woman with black hair dressed in a gray blouse with a look so alert it seemed she could see through things. "I'm Valentina Morales," she introduced herself with a firm voice. "Internal auditor. I've been tasked with investigating the suspicious money transfers related to Daniel Salgado." I nodded, trying to hide my nervousness. "I brought everything I have," I said, placing the USB drive and a folder of documents on the table. "This is what I've gathered on Daniel." Valentina opened her laptop, displaying a detailed analysis chart. She pointed to the screen. Her voice was monotonous but convincing. "In the last 3 months, $112,000 have been withdrawn from the company's account, divided into multiple transactions, and transferred to a secondary account in the name of Bianca Rivers. There's a history of expenses on a luxury apartment on 5th Street spa services and expensive gift cards." I looked at the numbers, the words on the screen, unsurprised. I already suspected Daniel was up to something shady when I found out about Bianca, but seeing the proof so clearly filled me with rage and pain. He not only abused and betrayed Sarah, but he was stealing money to support another woman. "Has he been doing this for a long time?" I asked with a trembling voice. Valentina looked at me. "At least 6 months, but we just discovered it thanks to an internal report." I handed them the USB drive. "Here's everything I have," trying to stay calm. The video from the camera in Sarah's house, the recording of Daniel insulting her, the clip from the dash cam at the bus stop, and the photos of him with Bianca. Valentina took the USB, plugged it into her laptop, and reviewed each file. Her expression didn't change, but Mr. Evans frowned, drumming his fingers on the table. "Mrs. Linda," he said, "this is very compelling evidence. It not only demonstrates the abuse, but it reinforces Daniel's motive. He was afraid Sarah would discover his infidelity and the financial fraud, so he looked for a way to silence her." I nodded, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from my chest. Finally, someone believed me. Finally, I wasn't alone. 2 days later, Mark called me in the middle of the night. His voice was rushed. "Sis Daniel's company just issued a statement. He's been suspended indefinitely. He's under internal investigation. I sat up bolt upright in bed, my heart racing. Really, Mark, they acted that fast. Mark chuckled softly. Sis, with what you gave them, they couldn't ignore it. But be careful. Daniel is not one to give up easily. Mark's words sent a chill down my spine. I knew Daniel was cunning, but I didn't imagine he would react so quickly. The next morning, I opened Facebook to see if there was any neighborhood news, but what I saw left me frozen. A long post on Daniel's profile with a title that paralyzed me. When you just want to be a good husband, but they turn you into the villain. He wrote like a victim, saying that I, his mother-in-law, had slandered him, made up stories, destroyed his family. He posted old videos. Him holding my grandson cleaning up, spilled milk, kissing Sarah's forehead while she slept, all with soft background music. I watched it with trembling hands, blood boiling in my veins. Those images were real, but I knew they were just a facade. How long had he been putting on this show, and how many people believed him? Below the post, his mother. Mrs. Helen left the first comment like a stab in my heart. My son is carrying the weight of the world. But the reality is that Sarah was diagnosed with postpartum emotional disorder. She herself said her own mother wanted to harm her, and now that mother blames my son. That morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Social media notifications were piling up. Messages, comments, even calls from distant relatives I barely remembered. A niece called me, her voice hesitant. "Auntie, I didn't think my cousin-in-law was suffering so much. Please don't make the problem bigger, okay?" I squeezed the phone, wanting to scream, but I stayed silent. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was too tired of having to explain myself. I opened Facebook, and Daniel's post hit me again like a stage play, designed to make me the villain. Shared over 400 times, hundreds of comments of sympathy, calling him a devoted husband, harassed by a controlling mother-in-law. He wrote a long text, every word calculated. "Mrs. Linda, my mother-in-law, has always wanted to control Sarah's life. She never accepted me, never accepted her daughter's happiness. Even though Sarah doesn't trust me, I still change my son's diapers. I buy his medicine when he has a fever. I rock him to sleep every night." I read it with trembling hands, blood rushing to my head. She called me the shadow that silently destroys her own daughter's life. He posted short videos, him holding my grandson with a big smile, cleaning up spilled milk, kissing Sarah's forehead while she slept. The music was soft. The lighting of the videos was edited to make everything seem natural and warm. But I knew it wasn't the truth. It was a perfect show staged to hide what he had done. I wanted to scream, to post a reply, but I knew if I did, I would fall into his trap. He wanted me to lose my cool, to become the meddling old woman the malicious comments said I was. Below the post, unknown profiles jumped to Daniel's defense, insulting me. "That old woman is jealous of her daughter's happiness, trying to break up a young family. How evil!" I read and felt a sharp pain. The neighbors who used to smile at me, who had had coffee with me, now looked at me with suspicion. I went to the market and felt their sidelong glances, the whispers behind my back. "That's her Sarah's mom, they say she slandered her son-in-law." I bowed my head and walked faster, but my heart felt heavy. I had fought to protect my daughter, and now I was the one being criticized. 2 days later, I was with Mark in his workshop, reviewing the videos from the camera in Sarah's house. I wanted to find more proof, anything that would unmask Daniel's theater. Mark, with his sharp gaze, pointed to a video. "Sis, look at the time." The clip Daniel posted on Facebook where he holds the baby was recorded on the same day as this other one. I looked at the screen and saw Daniel holding my grandson, smiling like a model father. But just a few hours later, in another video from the hidden camera, he slaps Sarah in the living room right after she accidentally spilled a glass of water. "How are you going to take care of a child if you're so clumsy?" he yelled, his voice icy. Sarah just bowed her head, not daring to answer. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my skin. "Mark," I said with a choked voice, "he recorded those videos for show. Did he know we had cameras there?" Mark shook his head. "No, sis, he didn't know. Those videos are from before he probably recorded them to maintain an image. but now he's using them to deflect attention. I looked back at Daniel's post and saw a comment that made my heart freeze. Mrs. Helen, his mother, had uploaded a photo of a medical paper with the text, "Patient Sarah Salgado presents symptoms of postpartum depression. It is recommended to avoid contact with people who cause her emotional stress." The logo of a well-known hospital was in a corner with the illegible signature of a doctor. Below the comment, dozens of people shared it, saying that I was the cause of Sarah's depression. That mother is driving her daughter crazy. Poor Daniel having to put up with a mother-in-law like that. I stared at the screen, feeling like the whole world was turning its back on me. Sarah with depression. She had never told me, and the doctors at the hospital didn't mention anything. Was it true, or was it another of his tricks? That night I turned on the TV, looking for something to distract me from the attacks. But a brief news story on the local channel stunned me. The headline on the screen read, "Clinic owner arrested for forging medical documents. More than 40 psychological certificates seized, some used to evade legal responsibility in divorces and disputes." The reporter showed a close-up of the clinic's logo, and I recognized it instantly. It was the same logo from the medical paper Mrs. Helen had posted. I immediately took a picture of the screen and sent it to Mark and to Rebecca, the lawyer I had contacted the week before for advice. "Mark, Rebecca, look at this. That medical paper is fake," I wrote next to the photo, full of hope. Rebecca replied instantly, "Mrs. Linda, this is a major turning point. If we prove the document is fake, Daniel's whole act falls apart." Her voice through the message was cold but confident, like someone who knows they have the upper hand. Mark came to my house the next morning with a printout of the fake medical document. He enlarged the bottom left corner where the clinic's registration number was. "Sis, I already checked," he said, pointing to his laptop. "This number doesn't exist in the National Health System. That clinic was just shut down for forging documents. He and his mother went too far." I looked at the number. Those tiny letters I hadn't noticed before, but which now seemed to open a door to the truth. I nodded, trying to stay calm. "Mark, we have to act now. I'm not going to let them keep hurting Sarah with these lies." Rebecca called the district attorney's office to confirm the information about the clinic. A few hours later, she sent me a message. "Mrs. Linda, it's just as you thought. The clinic was shut down last week for selling fake documents for divorce cases and legal disputes. Mrs. Helen's paper is one of them." I squeezed the phone, feeling a new strength. Daniel and his mother had staged a perfect play, turning Sarah into the victim of an invented illness and me into the villain. But now I had the proof to unmask them. I spent the whole afternoon gathering everything. I took out the USB drive with the dashcam video from the bus stop where Daniel abandoned Sarah in the rain. I organized the clips from the hidden camera, the recordings of Daniel's voice insulting and humiliating her. I printed the photo of Daniel hugging Bianca on 5th Street and Valentina's financial analysis, which proved the embezzlement of $112,000 from the company. Finally, I placed the photo of the news story about the fake clinic on top of everything, like the jewel of my evidence collection. I looked at the piles of documents on the table, my heart heavy but full of determination. This wasn't just a battle for Sarah. It was also, for me, a mother who an entire neighborhood had turned its back on just for wanting to protect her daughter. The next morning, Rebecca and I went to the city police headquarters. I walked in with a thick folder, feeling like I was carrying my whole life in my hands. The officer who attended to us, a middle-aged man with a serious look, reviewed every page, watched every video. "Mrs. Linda," he said in a grave voice, "what you've brought us is very serious. We will open an official investigation for the crimes of domestic violence, document forgery, and corporate fraud." I nodded, trying to hold back the tears that wanted to escape. "Thank you, officer," I said with a choked voice. "I just want my daughter to be safe." He looked at me and his expression softened. "We'll do everything we can." After 2 days of statements, the case was turned over to the family court and the criminal court. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later, a time that felt like an eternity to me. I knew Daniel wouldn't just sit back. He was strangely quiet on social media. No new posts, no comments from Mrs. Helen, but I wasn't naive enough to believe he was remorseful. People like Daniel never shut up out of remorse. He was preparing his next move, and I had to be ready. Mark called me one night, his voice rushed. "Sis, I just discovered something. The bank account in Bianca Rivers' name is being emptied little by little, transferring the money to several small electronic wallets. He's trying to cover his tracks." I froze. "What do you mean, is he going to get rid of Bianca too?" Mark confirmed over the phone. "Exactly. I talked to a friend who works at the bank. These transactions started right after Daniel was suspended. He knows he's being investigated, and he's cutting all ties." I immediately called Valentina, and she confirmed it. "Mrs. Linda, our internal records show the same thing. He's using Bianca as a scapegoat. Daniel only keeps people around as long as they're useful to him." I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't feel sorry for Bianca. She had chosen to be on Daniel's side and had contributed to Sarah's pain. But I saw his cruelty clearly. He not only cheated on his wife and stole money, but he was willing to discard his lover as soon as she was no longer useful. The morning of the hearing, the sky was overcast with gray clouds that seemed to crush my spirit. I arrived early at the courthouse, sitting next to Sarah in a cold waiting room. She was wearing a long, pale blue dress and holding my grandson tightly. Her hands were trembling, but her gaze was firm. I looked at her, feeling a mix of pride and pain. Sarah, my daughter, once so fragile and scared, was now forcing herself to face the nightmare named Daniel. "I'm here, honey," I whispered, taking her hand. She nodded without speaking, but the gentle squeeze let me know she was leaning on me, just as I had always been her support since she was a child. Rebecca, our lawyer, had arrived the night before with a folder full of documents. She reviewed every page, every video, every copy, with the sharp gaze of a warrior ready for battle. Valentina was also there with a stack of accounting papers sealed in red, her face calm but determined. "Mrs. Linda," Valentina said in a grave voice, "today we will make sure he has no escape." I nodded, trying to hide the anxiety that was consuming me. I had come so far, I had gathered all the evidence, but I was still afraid. Afraid that Daniel, with his cunning, would find a way to turn the situation around one more time. Daniel arrived 10 minutes late, walking into the room in a light gray suit, his hair combed, feigning calm. He was accompanied by his mother, Mrs. Helen, and Bianca, the young woman I had seen in the video from 5th Street. Mrs. Helen was dressed in black, her face as hard as a stone, while Bianca kept her head down, her hands clasped in front of her. I glanced at Sarah and saw her look at Bianca for a moment, before quickly looking down, holding my grandson tighter. I knew she was holding back, fighting to keep the pain from overwhelming her. I put my hand on her shoulder and whispered, "You're so strong, Sarah. I'm here." She nodded slightly, but her eyes were still full of wounds. The hearing began. The atmosphere in the room was as heavy as the sky outside. Rebecca stood up and presented the charges with a clear, sharp voice. She showed every piece of evidence. The dashcam video of Daniel abandoning Sarah in the rain, the clips from the hidden camera where he insulted and threatened her, the photos of him hugging Bianca, and the financial analysis that proved the embezzlement of $112,000. She concluded with the fake medical certificate that Mrs. Helen posted on Facebook, along with the information about the closed clinic. The room fell silent. You could only hear the rustling of papers and the held breaths of those present. I looked around and saw how the expressions of some jury members changed from doubt to astonishment. When it was Daniel's lawyer's turn, I held my breath, preparing for a long string of denials. But what happened left me stunned. His lawyer, a short man with thick glasses, stood up and said in a calm voice, "We do not dispute the evidence presented." A murmur went through the room, and I felt my heart stop. They didn't dispute it. Daniel stood up, looked directly at the judge, and said in a clear voice, "I admit I made mistakes, but I was not the mastermind. I was only following the orders of my mother Helen and Miss Bianca Rivers, who planned the social media campaign, edited the videos, and obtained the false medical documents." The room erupted in murmurs. Rebecca turned to look at me, her eyes full of surprise. I leaned over and looked at Bianca. She was rigid, her face pale, clenching her hands so tight her nails dug into her skin. Mrs. Helen jumped up, pointing at Daniel and shouting, "Liar! You said you would take care of everything, that I should just do what you told me." The judge banged her gavel, her voice severe. "Order in the court." But Mrs. Helen's cry echoed in my head. Daniel, the one who always acted like the perfect husband, was now turning his back on his own mother and his lover. He was willing to sink them to save himself. Bianca remained silent, not saying a word, her head bowed and her hands trembling. Judge Collins, a middle-aged woman with a penetrating gaze, asked Bianca to take the stand as a witness. She walked slowly, not looking at Daniel, not looking at anyone. Rebecca approached, holding up a bag with a USB drive. Her voice was calm but loaded with pressure. "We have more material, Your Honor, but the important thing is, Miss Rivers, do you have anything to clarify?" Bianca looked up, and for the first time she looked directly at me. Her gaze wasn't of hatred, but something more complex. Regret, fear, or both. Then she looked at Sarah and finally at Daniel, her eyes lingering on him, as if she were weighing something. The room fell silent. Only the ticking of the clock on the wall could be heard. Bianca took a deep breath and said in a low but clear voice, "Yes, I have a lot to say." My heart was pounding, not knowing what she would say. Would she defend Daniel or unmask him? I took Sarah's hand, feeling how cold it was. "Mom," my daughter whispered, her voice trembling. I squeezed her hand, trying to give her some of my strength. "It's okay, honey," I told her, though I was trembling too. Bianca was there in front of the whole room, and I knew that what she was about to say would change everything. Bianca, standing at the witness stand, began by taking out her phone and handing it to the court technician with a slow movement, as if she were lifting a weight off her shoulders. She opened a series of emails and screenshots. Her voice was monotonous, but heavy with meaning. "This is what I have." The technician projected the documents onto a large screen. I saw the messages Daniel had sent to Bianca. "If my mom finds out about this, blame it all on her. I'll say she did it alone to save face." Then a detailed plan for the Facebook post written by Daniel himself with his scrawled signature at the end. I froze when I saw the chats with a certain Robert M., the fake doctor, where Daniel agreed to buy the false medical certificate for $3,000. And finally, a short clip showing Daniel calling Bianca to scold her for not editing the part where he washed the diapers correctly in the video he used to build his image as a perfect father. The room was silent. I looked at Sarah and saw she was holding her breath, her hands clutching my grandson, her eyes full of tears. I turned to Valentina, and she nodded slightly. Her look seemed to say, "This is the final blow." Bianca continued, her voice firm. "I made a mistake. I thought I was special, that Daniel loved me. I know I'm not a victim, but I can't continue to be an accomplice to his lies either. He deceived all of us, Sarah, his mother, and me." Daniel, sitting in the defendant's chair, had a pale face and clenched fists. He shouted, his voice breaking, "What are you saying, Bianca? You promised you wouldn't." Judge Collins banged her gavel, her voice severe. "Silence the defendant." But his shout echoed in my head like that of a cornered animal. Rebecca stood up, holding up a USB drive, her voice sharp. "Your Honor, we have more documents that confirm this.